The ones the guest house claims. It seems strange to Julia that a next-door neighbor should be so close to her parents' home in the Iowa countryside, but as her mom and dad often reminded her, it was only a guest house and they were actively renting it out to a nice family. But why did the house have to be so close to her bedroom window, which was a reality that was so painfully obvious that she was reminded of it every time she walked into her old childhood bedroom at night, pulling on the light bulb cord in her ceiling fan? She didn't ever remember the guest room being a problem when she was growing up. But then again, her grandpa had been living in that house and had appreciated his privacy even more than she ever did, buttoning his shades tight and retiring to bed soon after the sunset. Now, for the first time at the age of 31, visiting her parents' house for the Christmas holiday and free for the month from her teaching job, she was most displeased to find that the guest house immediately outside her bedroom window was most noticeable at that time of year when the sun set every night at 6 p.m. And the neighbors never drew their blinds. Every window was bare and filled with electric light every time she peered out her own bedroom window, which she too preferred to be unshaded. She felt somewhat claustrophobic whenever the blinds were pulled and natural light was prevented from gracing her white walls and ceilings. She even liked to keep them open at night so that the moon could peek into her bedroom and she could watch the stars twinkle from her bed. But now she had to worry about possibly being seen in her own bedroom by the strange neighbors next door, who hated window covers as much as she did. She often wondered if she should worry so much, though, as any time she approached her two-story window and looked out, she never saw anyone in the house. It always remained an empty and unlived-in dollhouse. There was hardly even any considerable furniture to be seen. It was as if it was a show house meant to be left on display for potential buyers. But when Julia asked her parents, they said a young couple were leasing it out for the year. Were they on vacation then? No. They expressed that they'd seen Nicholas and Catherine earlier that morning. They both worked in town and could often be seen tending to their garden along the other side of the house and walking their dog, but Julia was yet to catch sight of any of this activity. Night after night she was left to glare across at that burning beacon of a glass house so naked and vulnerable to the night, and she had quickly adapted to navigating her bedroom in the dark, skulking around like her parents' barn cat, Teddy, and spying longingly out the window to catch any activity in the windows. But she never saw a single person striding into the kitchen to get something out of the refrigerator, or pull a single chair away from the boring and untouched glass kitchen table. She started to think that the sparse amount of furniture had been there when her grandpa called the place his home, almost 15 years ago. If there was a bed in the bedroom, she couldn't tell based on the angle, as she could only see the closed closet door opposite. However, she could see just about every other angle in the house through the several windows. The front door, the pantry, the living room, complete with her grandpa's stuffed chair and tube TV, and closed basement door. She stared through the sliding glass door the most, through the kitchen and to a piece of the parlor beyond. She thought that the parlor was the one corner of the house that she didn't have eyes on, and that this must be where the man and woman spent their nights. She had even spent hours on her knees in her pajamas long after her parents had already gone to bed, and with her chin on the windowsill in the blacked-out room, waiting for a shadow to slice across the wall, or a woman in slippers to exit the parlor and proceed up the stairs, which she also had a partial view of. How could no one in the house use the kitchen or the stairs or walk in and out of the basement in all the hours she had spent staring in? Where were they hiding? As far as she could tell, their cars were parked in the driveway, and she even saw the dog sleeping in the laundry room on his mat, just as he always was, and he never once roused or raised his head in all her hours of observation. She was even beginning to wonder if the windows were really open at all, or if the animations she was seeing were painted on or somehow projected on jumbo screens. This gave her the creepiest sensation of all, wondering what activities could be played out behind such a facade. And every night she ended up falling asleep, sometimes there on the carpet below her window, only to wake up in the morning to see that the windows were still unshaded, all the lights were off, and the dog was now outside, sometimes sleeping on the porch or sniffing around the backyard. Still, she never caught sight of the neighbors, and the cars were often gone from the driveway. Once she even skipped out on a meal early so that she could run to her window and catch the neighbors as they proceeded to turn on every light in the house. But even so early in the evening, before the sun had even set, the lights were on, and the dog was back in his place in the laundry room, and there wasn't a sign of her neighbors. They hadn't hung a single Christmas decoration. There was no tree in the window like her parents had done, and the fireplace was always cold and bare as the walls. On the winter solstice, she puffed briefly on a dog whistle that she had dug out of some of her father's things in the barn, dating back to his days when he was an active sheep herder. But the dog never even twitched an ear from his place on the laundry room mat. She even stuck her head out the window but could not disturb the golden retriever in the slightest. She watched as Teddy the cat even skulked past the sliding glass door, in eyesight of the laundry room, as if taunting the mutt. But no progress could be made to solve Julia's mystery. The only surefire option she could devise to her anxieties would be to walk over 20 yards or so onto the next property and knock on the door, but somehow she could not bring herself to do it. She needed to be able to see the other side of the front door through the sliding glass. Being on the receiving end of the front door, shivering on the front porch, did not seem like the best option at all. So on that winter solstice, while her parents were watching TV downstairs, she used her cell phone to look up the nearest pizza delivery place, and she gave them the address for the guest house next door, along with instructions for the pizza man to ring the doorbell, and if no one answered, open the door and leave the pizza on the welcome mat. She didn't know if the door would be unlocked, but she would at least see if anyone moved from inside to open the front door. She wanted to see if the parlor was spacious enough to hide them from her prying eyes for the better part of the night. Part of her just wanted to get a visible image of the bedroom in her mind. It was possible that they were always in the unseen bed when she was busy spying on their house from her room. But why with all the lights on? Were the lights on a timer? In the next hour, the pizza man arrived, parking in the driveway beside the pickup truck that was already there, and he strode up to the porch. She got a good look at the man, a skinny goateed, scruffy-haired college-age guy with a baggy work shirt and cargo shorts. From Julia's bedroom, she could not see the front porch, but she kept her eyes glued on the front door, visible through the sliding glass in the kitchen. And she waited with bated breath as the pizza man's shadow slid across the tinted glass at the top of the door and appeared to knock. The dog did not budge from his place in the laundry room. A long pause followed, and Julia let out a squeak of anticipation as the door opened. But she did not see the pizza man on the porch. It was completely empty and dark. There was no pizza box on the doormat, and she watched as the door closed again, as if nudged by the wind. Still, the dog slumbered. Julia redirected her focus to the driveway, where the pizza man's hybrid was still parked, but she no longer saw the pickup truck. How had the pickup started and backed out of the long dirt drive-in without her hearing it or seeing the headlight slice across the front of her parents' house? It was so perplexing that she had to sneak past the living room to slide out the back door and approach the guest house from the side. She wasn't afraid to wake the dog, even as her shadow was cast through the glass to spot the laundry room floor, and she paused in the driveway to inspect the pizza man's hybrid, which did not have any marking on it to advertise that it was owned by a pizza joint. She climbed to the top of the porch and inspected the door. There was no pizza box or any sign that someone had just stood there or opened the door. The porch looked inviting enough. The light was on, like every other in the house, and she revisited fond memories of sitting on the white wicker chairs there on the front porch with her grandpa, drinking tea and flicking playing cards into an open top hat for fun, and discussing his early childhood in the old countryside of Scotland. The chairs were still there, as she remembered, worn and unchanging after all these years. For the first time in the last few years, on the country estate since her grandfather's death, she could feel his presence there on the front stoop with her. She could almost hear his dry laughter and smell his cigar smoke on the wind. "Grandpa?" she asked the night. But nothing answered her, of course, and she didn't know what she had even expected to happen. Even with that creeping wave of gooseflesh prickling her neck, she managed to knock on the door and wait, expecting a dog to bark, a stare to squeak, anything, but nothing happened. She tried the knob and it turned. She bounded backward, halfways across the porch, as she pushed open the door, giving herself just enough room to take off down the stairs in case the dog came charging out after her. But she was met with nothing but a screen of darkness on the other side of the door. She squinted her eyes and ventured closer, dubious with the fact that the lights had switched off. Finally, and a cold breeze, colder than what was circling around her parents' 7 acres, breathed on her face from the recesses of the house. And once her eyes adjusted, she saw that it wasn't exactly pitch black on the other side. A pool of moonlight had spotted a wild-growing hillock on the other side of the door, as if the house had completely collapsed in on itself and she was looking out at a field of ruins in the middle of the night. No longer her father's land at all, but something much more untouched by man and ancient, reminiscent of Scotland. Perhaps 50 yards from her, a circle of 5 jagged slate-like stones protruded from the hillock, seeming to reflect in the moonlight like upright mirrors. Teddy the cat skirted past her and up the stairs, disappearing through the doorway with his tail up and dancing as if to lure Julia into chasing after him. But she heard the horns and drums escalating somewhere in the distance, rolling with the hills, and she ran in the other direction, back to her parents' house, and she heard the front door slam behind her. Julie had spent the rest of the night at her windowsill again, monitoring the house's interior, but nothing looked different, and she certainly never caught sight of that ancient countryside again. The moon wasn't even out that night, so she couldn't begin to comprehend what she had peered through. Somehow she fell asleep on her cold carpet again, and she awoke to the sounds of a dog barking in the early morning. She was quick to fill the length of her window as she looked down at the guest house's backyard, where Teddy the cat could be seen running past the extent of Rufus's leash, attached to a wooden post. He barked and thrashed as Teddy disappeared, and she heard a man's voice and whistle as the guest leaser finally made himself known. The dog instantly ran to his side as he pulled open the sliding glass door and called from the back porch. She gasped as she recognized the pizza man from the night before. There was no mistaking the goatee and skinny arms. He was even wearing the cargo shorts from yesterday. But the pizza uniform shirt had been replaced with an oversized polo. The man bent down to pat the dog on the head as he pulled on the leash to its full reach again. Julia ran downstairs and found her father on his own back porch, watering the flower bed with a hose. "Dad, who's that man?" Julia almost demanded, pointing across the way at the pizza man and his dog. Her dad humored her and scrutinized the distance with squinted eyes. He didn't have to look for long, as he was quick to return his attention to his chore, ready to ignore his daughter completely. "Todd, that's the young man who's leasing the guest house with his wife. Why?" "You're sure that's him? I thought his name was Nicholas." "Nicholas? No. Julie," he scoffed. "I'm sure. You think I don't recognize the man? Look in the junk drawer yourself. I made a copy of his driver's license when he signed the lease." "In the car? That hybrid in the driveway. Didn't he have a pickup truck just yesterday?" "Pickup?" her father interjected with a furrowed brow. "No, silly, I'd remember that. Go look at the license if you don't believe me." Julia did just that and found the black and white scanned copy from the printer, which depicted the same man she'd hired to deliver a pizza only 8 hours ago. He was perhaps a couple years younger in the photo, but this was certainly him. This was certainly Todd. She returned to the back porch just as her father was rolling up the hose, and she looked across the way as the man was waving his dog back inside, just about to venture back in himself and close the door behind him. They locked eyes across their respective backyards, and the man smiled before walking back into the dim shadows inside his kitchen, the door closing. Then her eyes happened to slide up the front of the house just in time to watch at least 3 adult figures step out of view from the glare of the upstairs bedroom, moving at the same time and as graceful as a free-floating shadow. She kept her eyes on the glass for some time, waiting to see if the figures would reappear, or if a cautious head would poke back into the frame to continue to spy on her from the shadows, to give her a taste of her own medicine. But she was left with the myriad of unanswered questions there on her parents' back porch, and she could not say that she felt her grandfather's presence, not anymore. She walked back inside and closed every curtain that she could find, counting down the days until Christmas in her head.